Views expressed here are not supported by and do not reflect those of the Evening Rush Network. Viewers' discretion is advised.
Here once again. We don't have our live track and all that other good stuff, but it is plugged with Molly and Joe, the mental warriors, along with my brother Zachariah. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties today, sorry and unfortunately, but our brothers are still here. Joe is still in the background. Joe, you with me?
Yeah. What's
Yeah.
going on, my brother? I told you, they are not going to stop me. I'm here. You're going to hear my voice today. I promise you that.
All right. So we're gonna make up for the fact that you can't see him today, but that's good in the Spotify world and all the other little worlds, right? I guess that works out, right?
Yeah, I mean, they don't know what I look like if they don't look at the show, the YouTube, the video link.
Right.
If they hear the audio, all they can do is put a voice.
Right. So we're talking about the spots like Amazon Music. They can only hear your voice. Pandora. They can only hear your voice. Stitcher. Podchaser, TuneIn, Reasons Podcast, Google Podcast. The only place that we want to see you is on YouTube and on Facebook. We on Instagram. I mean, so we want to see you on Instagram. I'm guessing. Anchor.fm. We got Spotify. We got iHeartRadio. We got Mixcloud. We got iTunes Podcast. And then we got the eveningrushnetwork.com, which they want to see you on there too. And then you could download the app on both iOS and Android. All right. Today, what's coming on tonight's show? Tonight's show is really deep. Topic of the day is domestic violence and abusive behaviors. Very, very, very deep topic. We are also going to do what we do best, which is pay homage right before we open up any other topic or what have you. And then if we have time, getting through this topic for the day, we're going to run into a few current events. All right. So what we're going to do right now, as we tend to do, is we're going to talk about our week. Me personally, it's just a steady motion. You know what I mean? What about you, Joe?
A lot of change, a lot of transitioning, just dealing with the process of it is really hard. Like when you've been somewhere for a long time and when you have to up and leave with a limited amount of time, it can be a little stressful. And I'm starting to experience that myself. So, I mean, I'll be where I need to be sooner than later, but just understanding, you have to purge a lot, you shred a lot of stuff where you are and where you've been, and it looks like it's like, wow, all of this stuff that was built here, and you're taking it to another place to build more memories and to build more of a legacy. So it's a lot, but I'm excited for the challenge and for the opportunity what's happening, and it's gonna work out positive at the end.
Right. Me, I don't know. I try not to dwell on the past too tough because it can burden you somewhat. But my past week, I watched some football. Watched some football with you. It was some good games. One of our writers says, Jada says, "Stay encouraged, Joe."
Absolutely.
But of course, man, you got this, man. You're only leveling up in each situation that I've noticed that things are happening for you. You're only leveling up. So there's that. You know what I mean? But my week is fairly the same. Dealing with my after school program, Baller, Big Appalachian Academy for the Arts. Working behind the scenes, trying to get that program running, like a well-oiled machine, so to say. Shout out to Jada John and everybody over at Baller for everything that they do. So basically, did you see that game, man? That the end of that game with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, bro?
Absolutely. I gotta say, hats off to all of the teams that played this past weekend, because all 4 games were amazing. It all came down to the last possession.
Mm-hmm.
And that game, Buffalo and Kansas City, that was, oh man, I felt like I was invested because I felt like I was rooting for one of my teams. That's how good of a football game. We won't see another game that good for the rest of the
No. I mean, I could think that the the not even a fan of football would see something like that and become a fan just to say that they saw something like that in 2 minutes. Like, come on, 24 points in 2 minutes. Oh man, that was rather amazing, man. But that's our intro. We let you know what's going on, what we got coming up. Topic of the day: domestic violence and abusive behaviors. Big topic. But first and foremost, what we're going to do is we open up our show by paying homage to our ancestors or giving flowers to those that deserve it. So first and foremost, this week, what we're going to do is we're going to pay homage to our ancestors. Joe, who you got for us?
I have somebody who's not well known, but in New York City he is.
Mm-hmm.
He was a historian, a collector, an activist. I'm talking about Arturo Alfonso Schomburg. He was of Puerto Rican and German descent. He moved to the United States in 1891, where he researched and raised awareness of the contributions of Afro-Latin Americans and African Americans and what they have made to society. He was very important during the Harlem Renaissance, and he's well known for starting the library on 135th Street here in Harlem, and just inspiring a lot of other people to come and understand their culture. Marcus Garvey, Dr. John Henry Clark. These are people who were mentored by that were mentored by him and started their own legacies. So Alfonso, Arturo Schomburg was the one up here that got people to find themselves within themselves. So kudos to him and the legacy that he left behind. And hopefully, I personally tend to look at him and say I would like to be that type of brother or be that type of person, and I hope I'm doing a good job of continuing that. So. We're paying homage to Arturo Schomburg today. Thank you for creating the foundation for us to do what we do.
Yeah, so that's a shout out, man. All right, yo, listen, Joe, you well on your way, brother. I mean, let's let you know, man. If you had to, if you had any thoughts on it, or if you had any question about it, bro, you well on your way to making. You've already done it. That's the way I look at it. We've already done something that could be put into the history books as part of the journey. You know what I mean? Somebody could fall up on these tapes or on these recorded shows and be inspired. And that's years from now, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, someone could be inspired by your words. So, never sell yourself short, brother. And like Jada said, stay encouraged. Stay encouraged. You know what I mean? Definitely stay encouraged. All right. So right before we go to Zach, who we're giving time to get on because he's dealing with a family situation and he really wants to weigh in on this topic, and he also want to pay homage as well. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about our what I'll do first is I'll pay homage first. And who I'm paying homage first to is none other than the young brother, our ancestor, Emmett Till. Emmett Till didn't get a chance to make a difference, but in his death, he did make a difference. And what he's known for is being basically murdered by two vile and foul human beings. And all because he so-called offended or whistled at a white woman. All right. So he was 14 years old when they murdered him. They basically lynched him and shot him. And his mother had an open casket so that the people can see the treachery of this country, of the people of this country, and the kind of treachery that can be done to a young man such as that. Emmett Till remains a symbol for the civil rights movement. Like that's when everything really started ramping up. No, Joe?
Well, I totally agree. I mean, when you hear the story of Emmett Till and you hear that he was so mutilated, they didn't even recognize him. Yes, his case was recently dismissed because the the person who accused him, Carolyn, I forget her last name, she said that it was false. She's like
Right.
84 years old and still alive. And now you make the claim to say, okay, he never did that.
Right.
So it's like kind of too little too late now, right?
Yeah.
But the situation with Emmett Till, in my personal opinion, was probably one of the first of those cases that we hear a lot of nowadays. We hear of young men getting killed, getting their lives killed for no apparent reason or for a careless reason by people who are filled with hate and injustice. So, Emmett Till was the first real story that I heard. Me being a young black man at the time, and people saying,
Yeah.
"Watch yourself."
Yeah, indeed. I mean, like, he was definitely one of the first stories that I've heard in regards to like something that horrible, and that something that horrible could happen to such a young kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was a straight up kid. But the show goes on, right? So it's like it keep happening, because we have Brother Aubrey. You know, understand what I'm saying? What's the
Ahmaud Arbery, whose case was just dismissed. They just did all of the people who killed him. They all doing life in jail. But it's unfortunate that this happened in the early 50s, and we're still experiencing Emmett Till like
situations. Right.
70 plus years later.
So that's the reason why we always got to remember our young brother, who had been one of our elders now, had he was given a chance to live. And shout out to his mother. I believe they have a show on Hulu now, then in regards to the mother's fight after his death.
Yes, it's called Woman of the Movement. I believe it's on ABC too.
Yes.
Yeah, they came out a couple of weeks back.
Shout out to them, and if you get a chance to check it out, and you'll probably be moved by the story if you haven't already been moved by a story such as this. All right. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to do, maybe a quick current event before we get into the topic. Why? Because we really want to give my brother Zachariah a little chance to get up in here and speak his mind on the topic of the day, because we really put a lot into trying to, I guess, prepare you guys for just to think a little bit, deeper, think a little bit more in a sense of positive thinking, critical thinking, and the such. All right. So right now, what we're going to do is we're going to speak about all right, we got Ruby Bridges. Okay, so the school district want to remove Ruby Bridges from the curriculum because the text didn't offer redemption for the white people.
Wow.
For the white people.
If that's not an example of what critical race theory is, I don't know what is. And that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like we mentioned, people threw bricks and stones at her, right? So now we have the people that are adults now and elders. They don't want to see their grandchildren showing video of them throwing stones at her.
Right.
And that's where we are right now. We know the story of Ruby Bridges. If it wasn't for Ruby Bridges, we wouldn't have had cases like the Brown versus Board of Ed, and they wouldn't have been integration within the schools.
Right. We wouldn't have got, what little bit of education that we can claim as ours now, we wouldn't have gotten that at all. So,
I mean, do you really? I mean, not to go too deep, but I mean, honestly, I don't think integration was a good idea to begin with.
Wow.
But to get equality on our end, we had to at least show people that we were equal to them. But I feel that we should have stayed segregated to begin with, because our knowledge of things would have been a lot better.
Well, I'll say this, right? I think that we needed integration in a sense, because we needed to know what's going on the other side of the wall. You know what I mean? On the other side of that coin. They had everything. They was running everything. They had their hands in everything. So I think that we had to mesh in a way, you know what I mean? We had to mesh in a way to where it's like, okay, you know what I mean? So we could understand, what's going on. You know what I mean? as opposed to being lost like we have been for all these years. And now I think revisiting that is not a bad idea. That's what I believe in it. You know what I'm saying? I believe revisiting it now is definitely not a bad idea. You know what I mean?
We can, I think there's more of an understanding of those times now. Like, these are things that our ancestors would talk about, our elders would talk about and say, you see what happened to us, you see what we went through. And now we have more of a public viewing to see what they're going through because it's still happening.
Okay, so the exact language in what they was trying to say is what the white folks saying is the text is too harsh in its depiction of a large crowd of angry white people who didn't want black children in a white school, as well as for not offering redemption in the end, meaning no offering of redemption, no way of saying, okay, they did that, but this is what they did in return of, of that. Like, they want us to be able to whitewash it ourselves, basically, is what they're saying. No?
Yeah. That's what it sounds like. They want to put a spin, a positive spin on a negative story.
Right. So Zach is here. Zach. What up, my boy? See, look.
Late than never, but I couldn't.
Hey, listen. The track actually worked now. Look, you came in, the track start working.
That's right. You brought all that energy, brother.
You brought that energy. Yeah, the track start working and everything. And yes, you're right. You're absolutely right, Jay. There was no redeeming action that actually happened for us to even speak to. I mean, except for, like you said, it led to laws being changed and amendments happening and the such. But what is that, right?
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're going to let Zach speak to who he's paying homage to. We're going to bring it right on back real quick. Zach, give us real quick who you paying homage to.
Okay. I'm paying homage to Elijah McCoy, which is an inventor that lived, 1800s. This guy is responsible for over 60 patents. Here, let me bring this up here. Excuse me if I'm underprepared.
Not a problem, brother. Not a problem, man. Don't worry about it, man. Take your time.
1844 to 1929. He was born in Canada, whose parents had fled slavery. He trained as an engineer in Scotland as a teenager. And he was unable to find an engineering position in the United States because they said, quote unquote, that job was for the white man. He was most famous for the invention of a lubrication device for the locomotives, for the railroads. And it was because of him. See, before his inventions, they used to have to stop the train to oil the parts.
Okay.
And he also upgraded that same device to work for factory machinery. So it was because of him that not only the transport and the railroad system in the United States was sped up in increasing the economy for the United States and getting products and goods to where they need to go faster. He also sped up the production and manufacturing of equipments in factories. So he was a huge part of the beginning of what was known as the Industrial Revolution. So this guy is where the phrase comes from, the real McCoy. So after he invented this lubrication cup, is what they call it. And let me just make sure I get this right. A lot of other copycats came about, and because he didn't actually have the money to fund it himself, he actually sold that patent to someone else who funded it, and a white man actually got credit for that invention. Came out later after his life that he was the actual inventor of those things, because paperwork was dug up to show that he actually had the first patent for it. So and that he sold it to that guy that took the credit, whose name need not even be mentioned, because this is the real McCoy, right?
McCoy.
So after he invented it, there was a lot of copycats, and locomotive companies, when they went to purchase it, would ask, "Is this the real McCoy?"
That's
You know,
what's up.
and so that's how that phrase came about. This guy was actually also he studied after studying the inefficiencies inherent in the existing system of oil axles. McCoy invented a lubricating cup, that's what it was called, that distributed oil evenly over all engine moving parts and mechanical parts of different machinery. He's also responsible for the ironing board because his wife couldn't iron on flat surfaces, and the folding ironing board, you know, the one with the X shape that closes, folds and closes, that we all had in our house, and the lawn sprinkler and other machines, countless patents, over 60. So I just think it's important to highlight people like him because we don't get taught about people like him in school. We don't get taught that some of the inventions that we use on a daily basis, or some of the inventions that actually built this country to what it is today and boosting the economy and the Industrial Revolution, were responsible by a black man. You know, so I think it's very important to highlight Elijah McCoy and his Google man. He's a lot more to his life. So there's my paying homage to this for this week.
Oh man.
Bringing the fire, brother. Bringing the fire.
What's funny, brother?
My fault, man. My fault. Oh man. Woo! Zach is back. Zach is back. He said he was gone, and he said he was coming with the fire, and we had to let him ride it out, man. But nonetheless, topic of the day: domestic violence and abusive behaviors. All right, it's nothing to be laughing about in this topic. This topic is very serious. I didn't see a scroll on the bottom. There you go. Domestic violence and abuse behaviors. Abusive behaviors, abuse behaviors, all in the same. Remember, you could call into the show. That's 357. Oh, no, that's Cash App, 347-859-2226. If you just want to give us a little couple of coins. Or you could call in 929-441-2417. That's 929-441-2417. Remember, we're on Facebook and at this very moment, and we'll be on Facebook later on. Alrighty. Oh man. Whew. Zach is back, boy. Alright. So
all of me.
Uh-huh.
Getting all of it.
Yeah. Domestic violence and other abusive behaviors are direct results of mental health issues, often derived from experience various forms of abuse, such as corporal punishment, meaning butt whoopings, behind whoopings, and as such. A definition: corporal punishment is a discipline method in which a supervising adult deliberately inflicts pain upon a child in response to a child's unacceptable behavior and or inappropriate language. It is not limited to physical pain or activities. Abrasive language, excessive sarcasm, or any other activity that makes a child uncomfortable in your presence can be deemed corporal punishment.
Wow.
All right. Now, that's a very wide statement, no?
Yes, broad spectrum of what it could include.
Yeah, that's a very broad spectrum. Do you agree? What's up, Sean? Do you agree that domestic violence and other abusive behaviors, such as emotional abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, and all those other different things, is a direct result of mental health issues?
I'll speak from that. I personally do believe it, because whether we want to believe it or not, those forms of abuse are traumatic to a person's life. And trauma is a direct source of mental health. The things that somebody goes through, if you're growing up being told negative things and, you know, it being an abusive relationship or in domestic households, and you come across people in your life later on that have exhibit the same behaviors that you grew up around, then you will, that has an effect on you emotionally as a person. So I believe those disciplines, or as you call it, or punishments as you call it, can be a factor of what you end up doing with your life. It could be passed on, it could be generational, but I personally believe that yes, it is something that that could lead to a factor of mental health.
Real quick, Zach.
Yes, I agree also. I do believe we can break DNA cycles. I'm a witness to people who have done it. But I do think it affects for generations. And sometimes it's unknowingly. But yes, I do believe it's a direct result of mental health issues.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it causes mental health issues, and
I agree
you
with
know,
that.
and and derives from having a mental health issue because, and I think the mental health issue stems all the way back from the times of slavery and how this country built itself on the whipping of the lesser people, whether it was their own or a black man or Indian or or white or a poor white man. It was always about corporal punishment was the way to have someone conform to what you want them to do. So I think that the mental health issue is actually just embedded in the DNA of us from a long time. This is years, right? This is centuries, right? No?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to highlight, right? I want to highlight real quick. So all right, someone wrote hurt people hurt other people. Yes. So yes, Tiffany Mathias, she agrees that that is a mental health issue. It is a direct result of mental health issues. Hurt people hurt other people. Sean says, I disagree. We don't have PTSD from how our parents raise us.
Well, we're a different generation too. That's also a factor, you know. And I think some of the things that we grew up with today are called child abuse, and in our time, it was normal.
Right, because
I
and I'm gonna say suffered from corporal punishment, and then again, when I look at what I could have, like, I don't know, it's weird, and then that's this country, right? So the funny part is you get whipped, and then in some weird way down the line, you actually validate your whippings. You actually validate you getting beat. Now, you know what I mean?
There's a difference between abuse and discipline, right? And I think that today that fine line is being erased, you know, to where we were being questioned. Oh, you can't even whoop your child without somebody saying it's child abuse. But what we're talking about too is domestic violence, right? So it reminds me of a meme I saw one time on social media where the husband was beating the wife, and then the wife was beating the kid, and then the kid was beating his teddy bear.
We should have found that one. We should have found that one.
I was trying to find it and I couldn't, so I thought I'd talk about it. But and it's talking about how behavior patterns are passed down, by what you see and what you grow up to. So I think today, how parents discipline their children is sometimes a direct result of how they were raised. And like I said, every generation is like they're becoming marshmallows nowadays, where you can't even yell at your child. It's now corporal punishment is deemed by the child. Oh, if it makes me uncomfortable, man, get out of here.
Right, listen. Right. I'm working in childcare, and I know a lot of people who can relate. I believe that corporal punishment and discipline doesn't have to be a factor, but I understand where and why it needs to be used at certain times. But there are ways to discipline without that. And I think that's more or less someone who's from the old school or older generation won't understand, because they won't see the quick impact than what a discipline would do. As opposed to taking a modern day method of discipline. They won't see that.
All right. So what I want to speak to is we're having in the comment section a few things here and there, right? So we have Sean, why don't you call in and speak and try to clear up what you're trying to convey to us? Because I'm hearing you, but then again I'm like, because you're saying look, we can't do anything to our kids now, and now they're killing each other. Do you think that disciplining them is direct
lack of discipline? It sounds like he's saying, right? Because now they're growing up with lack of discipline.
Right. So you're saying the lack of discipline is what's causing our children to act out even more so? Is that what you're saying? So write in, yeah, okay, yes, he said yes. All right.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I can man, listen.
I
I don't
somewhat
know.
agree. I
I
somewhat
don't know.
agree, but
Yeah,
I'm working with, in the environment that I work in. I could say sometimes that's not always the case.
Yeah, there's
You
so
have
many
kids that are generally, depending on the environment that they live in, they can have a peaceful mindset, they can have a good heart, but a lot of it is because of the environment that they grew up into.
well, that goes to what Jada is saying as well. Jada says in writing, she says, I also believe that abusive behaviors are learned behaviors.
Absolutely.
I
And I
agree.
can agree to that because I'm gonna speak from a personal standpoint. All right, and let's go there. Let's just peel it off, right? And I know I came up in an abusive household. You understand what I'm saying? I know this for a fact. Do I say that it did it help me? I believe it helped. I believe it saved me because I think there was more. I think it was more to be abused by and abused, and outside of my home without that love, without any care in the world about me, then when there's people that care about you and they just want you to do good about yourselves and their way of doing, they have tough love. You understand what I'm saying?
I have an opinion or an explanation why it wouldn't affect you and is affecting other people differently. Just having known you, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
and your father. So after the commercial, maybe we could dive into that a little bit.
Right. Let's go into a commercial right now.
Looking to podcast shows and do not know where to start? The Evening Rush Network can help you with that. Call us at 929-441-2417 or email us at theeveningrushnetwork@gmail.com for dates and prices. We got you for all your podcast needs. The Evening Rush Network. Tune in, subscribe, and share.
Yeah, we are back. We are back. We are back. This is a deep topic. My heart feel like it's racing a little bit because it's such a deep topic, man. I don't know, man. It's so many emotions that could go with this, man. And our topic for today is domestic violence and abusive behaviors. Um, I hope after today we could try to understand it more and try to mute it, try to kill it, try to end it in a sense where he said abusive. You know what I mean? Now, discipline is one thing. We're
Right.
talking about abuse today. You
Right.
understand what I'm saying? We talking the whip to the back kind of abuse. And I think that's, like I said, I think that's just a pattern from slavery where our slave masters got whatever they wanted out of us by breaking us. You know what I mean? And I think that we inherited that same mentality through history.
This is true.
I agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
All right.
Go ahead.
So before we go, remember we got to do our sponsor. Remember we're sponsored by Baller. None other than Baller, shot caller, Big Apple Leash Capital for the Arts, www.baller.org. Holla at us, shout us out, send some prayers. We're also on Instagram at Plugged MJ. That's at Plugged MJ. But yeah, man, boy, this topic is so deep, man. It got so many layers to this topic, right? Zachariah, you were saying something before the break.
Yeah, I was just saying that, as far as like that home that today is considered abusive and in our days it was just considered disciplinary. I think I knew people whose parents were very abusive and they grew up to actually be very strong human beings. But I think there's a fine line because even though you might grow up to be strong and resilient, there are still demons and trauma that follows along with that, and I think it's just a quick personal side note. In my household, I think it was a lack of the discipline because I was raised in a single parent household by my father, who was always going to work. So it's like the streets was raising me and other people's parents when I was at their houses. And then, it was a time in my life where I got shot in the chest and I died on the operating table. And when I woke up, one of the first things my father told me is, I should have whooped you more when you were little. you know.
Well, I
And
got whooped and I got shot. So there's that. Like, I mean, like, you know,
you see what I'm saying? The point is that my father felt guilty, like it was his fault because he didn't whoop me enough of what he said, of what he felt. So in my mind, there needs to be a balance where the discipline has to happen, but then there's an overboard where it becomes abuse. Like you shouldn't be bruising your kids and blacking their eyes and stuff like that. But do they need to be? Did they ass whoop sometimes? Absolutely.
right.
You know.
So yeah, there was discipline in life and made me make better choices. Unfortunately, Jada had to experience abuse from her mother and from her ex-husband, which she's correlating that if what she had to accept as a child is something that she saw as the norm, whereas when she grew up it was something that she would just have to accept from her husband. You know what I mean? So, you know, my heart goes out to you that you even had to experience that, and I do agree in some ways that yeah, it's a learned behavior. It's you learn to accept the abuse, and vice versa. You learn to give the abuse from people who has done it. Unfortunately, my father was abusive, you know, in a sense, you know what I mean, and that's full disclosure, you know what I mean. But then something clicked in him, and he stopped. You understand what I'm saying? You know, and thank God that was the case. You know what I mean? But you know,
He grew older and wiser. You know what I
and
mean?
Right. It came with the experience of life. When you
Yeah.
see things in life and see how things work, you can go, oh, maybe I don't have to do this. There's another way to show yourself or show discipline without being physical. You know, there's different ways
and
to prove it.
and by the end of this topic, we want to speak to that. All right, guys, we want to speak to those ways of showing of disciplining without the abuse, without being abusive, you know, without the physicality you know what I mean, without so much physicality. Because you might have to grab your son and hold him, maybe, you know what I mean, like where are you going, like, you know, you don't want to run in the street or nothing like that, you know, something like that, you know, something happened there. All right. But all right, so emotional abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, all of those things is the forms of, you know, forms of abuse. Now there was something that says there's something in our research we was looking up, and it says due to systemic racism, which affects our social structures as well as our policies, both black women and black men experience domestic violence at higher rates than other communities. In fact, 45.1% of black women experience physical violence, sexual violence, or stalking from their intimate partner, while 40.1% of black men experience those abuses. On average, 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence, that's 33.3%, and 1 in 4 men experience domestic violence, that's 25%, showing
This
that
is
African Americans are disproportionately affected by abuse.
Was this talking about the black community, or were we talking about the United States, all men, all women? Those statistics, those last few.
I believe it's the United States. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I'm going to guess it's the United States.
It says that the black
Jada,
community.
let us know if that's the case. Jada, let
Yeah,
us know
black
if that's
community.
the case. It's the black community. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And that those numbers are unacceptable. You know, I mean, but like you
right,
said, a lot of that stems from generations of.
right. Because when you like, I mean, when you look, Joe, go ahead, speak. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, growing up, I mean, we look at it across our neighborhoods and across this country. Remember, there was a point in time when anybody could discipline you. It wasn't your parents. If
It
your
takes.
neighbor saw you in the street doing something wrong, they would discipline you, then tell your parents, and then your parents would discipline you too. So, and like you said, it's a learned behavior. It was just part of the culture, if you will. That's how it was growing up.
Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
nowadays, like you said, we can't do that without somebody saying something and saying, oh, that's child abuse. Not really understanding the situation, but they're gonna look at it as bad. I mean, I wish they had felt the same way during enslavement. I wish they had thought that was abuse too.
Yeah, well, okay. So I'm glad you spoke to slavery, because this is where a lot of the behavior, remember, is learned behavior, right? Remember, the slave masters abused our women. we weren't abused. It's a point I made with my wife today, is that we weren't the one. We were whipped, right? We were whipped into for them to think, for us to change, right? For us to conform to what they wanted us to do. So if we was being rebellious or something like that, they whipped us. They
Well,
didn't keep whipping us. They
well,
kept raping our women. They
well,
kept
well,
raping
well,
our
well,
women.
there's also historical it's also documented that the little boys were raped by the men, and in some cases their own father.
And
You know,
listen,
and at some point, you know what I'm saying? And
I'm
so
not denying that. I'm not denying that at
so
all. You know what I
growing
mean?
up like that, you grow up with a resentment towards your father for doing it to you. The wife hates the husband because he let that happen. He should have died for it instead of going along with it. You know, all that created that.
What about the wife being abused or physically abused, and the man don't do nothing, and she looks at him as a weaker man because you didn't do anything. You didn't.
And that's the same thing. But that's the same thing that's happening today. So what's happening is you have all these communities, these organizations that are built or designed to tear the family up from the inside. So the woman is able to rely on the government and resent her man, and at the same time he's still being abusive towards her because there's envy involved. There's a dissension in the household. The child has a resentment towards his father because he wasn't around, or maybe whatever the circumstances were, and then the mother ends up saying, well, I don't need you no more. All this is still going on because it's a systemic agenda, and there's reasons why there's mental health issues.
But that's the reason why the whippings must stop. In a sense, in this sense, and because I know Sean is advocating for a good old butt whooping, and I'm saying the reason why it has to cease is because it keeps producing the same kind of people. It keeps producing this toxicity that we're going to speak about later on, where men has to be, you know what I mean, slap their women around and spank their kids in order for them to get the point. You understand what I'm saying? And mind you, this is new for me. This is a new thought for me because I was totally for corporal punishment. You know what I mean? But right now I'm practicing. Let's talk. Let me try to understand exactly where you're coming from, and it's a discipline in itself. You know what I mean? But man,
well, let me say something in regards.
Go ahead,
in regards to what Zach is saying, we're still being whipped, but not physically.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's more of a mental whipping. So all those factors that you brought up, we're still being whipped and beaten. But
those mental issues come out physically now in your house.
Right. I agree. But that goes to show you there's ways to discipline, more different ways of discipline than what was initially presented to us. But this is a form of discipline too. It keeps us in our place.
I'll give you an example. Sorry to cut you off, Joe. Did I cut you off?
No, not at all.
Okay. I'll give you an example. An example of what they showed us it's like do as I say, not as I do, or what have you. Because when you look at white America, they don't whip themselves. They don't beat on themselves. They don't whip their kids. You know what I mean? You got that. You got the man, and that's where the domestic violence. Like I seen the domestic violence happens all the time. It seems like men to women is just something about that. And we're going to keep talking about that because we got some more topics we're going to touch. But when it came down to their children, they didn't whip their children.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fine line because there's a side of the spectrum where that doesn't work and it comes out with a negative result in the end. Like there's been
Columbine or something. Were you talking about Columbine and all that?
And I'm talking about watching Maury Povich and the father come out talking about my son chased me with a crowbar, and little Billy's 10 years old saying, "Get out my room." Yeah. You know what I mean? And yelling at his parents.
It's a balance. It's a balance we missing.
And that's why I said, when you tap their behind at, 4, 5, 6, whatever, that's not abuse, man. That's discipline to let you know, hey, you went too far this time. And now if I don't do it now, like one of my friends always tell me, listen, man, you want to cry. You want them to cry now or you want to cry later?
Right. Listen, spare the rod, spoil the child, right?
I'm 100%
That's difficult.
against domestic violence, but at a certain age, they need to be disciplined. Not no harsh stuff, but they need
I
that
got
tap.
you.
And that's my opinion, because I know people who grew up in abusive homes that
So-
don't never beat their kids, and their kids are excellent and on their way to success. You know what I'm saying? So actually, I haven't, accomplished that yet, which is the goal.
So
But I agree.
I'm going to speak to one thing. African Americans who are experiencing abuse may be less likely to call the law enforcement due to fears of their partner being brutalized or killed by the police. So what happens is the acceptance of the abuse from our women or whoever is getting abused, whether it be the child or what have you, they're afraid to call the law enforcement because they might get killed and or get railroaded into the system, right? It says on average, black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white men, with black women 1.4 times more likely to be killed killed than their white counterparts. Due to these fears, many people are less likely to get police involved or even with their safety at risk. So people go through it because out of love they wouldn't want their significant other to go to jail or to get manhandled or anything, because jail, listen, it's a toss-up what could happen behind them bars. No,
Absolutely.
so the question I got for you guys today is, why not explore alternatives to incarceration such as therapy and anger management? Why aren't we getting help? Remember, mental health, right? Why aren't we getting the necessary help that would calm us down in them situations, that would allow us to be in touch with our anger and not go overboard, you know what I mean, on our women or what have you?
Oh, I got an answer for that. Let me answer that. So the reason why it's not being promoted as such is because it's not financially viable to the jails. It's not financially viable to the government. Remember, they get the system. They get paid for every person who's in jail, and it's free labor and cheap labor. So the reason why that system will never be replaced is because it's helping build this country. It's just a legal form of slavery, as we know it.
I might add that most jails are private owned today under the guise of a corporate institution.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's big business. I mean, listen, when you think about it, it was smart. Like, they got some real cheap labor out of that deal, didn't they?
Yes, they do, and still doing it. And they will never get rid of that, because it would be easy for us to say, well, let's try to psychologically handle the situation. Let's do more mental therapy. Let's not be as harsh as we are with crimes and things that way. But it's not financially viable to do that. And they need to keep this country running.
Okay. In that sense, hence, so you do agree we need therapy and anger management in these situations.
I would say, can we be more creative on creating, community organizations that breed unity first between a husband and a wife in the Black community? Because with that foundation, you hold the entire family together. I always tell my wife that, if our children see that we agree, they have no choice but to go along with us. Once they see us disagreeing or arguing with each other, they're going to disobey.
I say do the disagreeing behind closed doors, man. I say
what we need in not just the Black community, as people in general, we need more love. And what we need to understand is what that means is when you get a partner, when you get married, when you decide to have children, that person is your partner for life, through thick and thin. And you're supposed to work out any problem, regardless of how deep it is, no matter what, unless there's a total betrayal and it becomes toxic for your health and safety.
Right. And that word came back up, toxic. Right? So let's because we man, listen, boy, this topic is so deep, man. This topic got so many layers, man. And I don't feel like we're speeding through it. I feel like we're going right on the pace that it needs to be going on. And I agree with you, Zach. I agree. I think it needs to be more love pumped into our community. You know what I mean?
Starting from the father and the mother in the household.
Right. And they got to show more love. You know what I mean?
Towards each other. There needs to be a united front there.
And you don't have room. And then you don't have room.
I'm sorry. If both of them have the same mindset to work it out, there will be less toxicity.
Right. So domestic violence, it's a form of discipline in a sense, right? That's what people try to think, because it's like, okay, well, I don't get you to do what I want you to do, so I'm gonna smack you around and make sure you do it, or I'm a jerk, So because it's disciplinary measures or behaviors learned through American history and culture. That's how America dealt with things, right? They deal harsh with things. They go to war for for anybody, with anybody, for anything. You understand what I'm saying? So they just have this roughness, about them, right? And this edge, and it's always in violence that they do these things. What role does religion play in excessive disciplinary patterns? Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Though that's a comment that I was bringing up earlier. I mean, we go deep into the religion and we see that the religion was the calm way to turn the other cheek. That's another form of it. Accept what's happening to you, but don't react in a way that continues the violence.
These are both sides of that spectrum. To turn the other cheek or spare the rod, spoil the child. It depends on who's perceiving that, because people come into religion, they come into topics like this with their preconceived notions of what they think they already know because of their own personal experiences and biases in life. So when you hear a phrase like that, you interpret it to what it means to you, and you act it out according to, so spare the child, spoil the child. So what you trying to say? I can't never whoop my kid? That's not what it was saying. It was trying to give you the rod is a metaphor for correction.
Right.
You have to have some type of
if you have to have some correction, or the child will be, like you said, a brat. I don't want to do nothing, this, that, and the third.
Right. And the person who's dealing with it has to have the wisdom to be able to carry it out in a way that's appropriate.
Zach,
right.
Zachariah, I believe you could speak to I believe you could speak to this. We was part of a way of living that explored excessive disciplinary patterns.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And like I said, mental issues is not to have. I mean, we're talking verbal, we're talking physical abuse, we're talking verbal abuse, we're talking mental abuse, we're talking everything.
The circle.
And, yeah, a whole man. Listen, a circle where grown men surround you and beat on you because you did something wrong at one point in time or what have you. What it does is it actually creates a hard shell of a person. What you think?
Yeah,
man?
I think it creates the person not being able to express who they really are for fear that they might be persecuted because of it. I think it creates that particular type of discipline or abuse, I would say, because that was more along the lines of abuse, to where if you had to walk a certain way. See, also what I don't agree with, what happens in the school system, and it's just something similar to where there's only one right answer. There's only one code of conduct. There's only one right way to behave, or else you're wrong. And I don't think that's true in a lot of different aspects of life. And so when you have this thing where people look at religion that way, is because a lot of religions are enforced that way. And I think that's not what real spirituality is. That's not what all religions preach, but you have individuals as leaders and who are involved in the leadership that carry it out that way, which turns people off from a religion or from a belief in a system that tells you that it should be supported in spirituality of God, or this is what God said. And so if we don't want to carry it according to the religion, it's actually the people who are the leaders in charge that are carrying it out this way, that it's their fault. It's not the religion.
Joe, what do you have to say to that?
In regards to religion, now this is where it's interesting. Like I've mentioned before, that was a foundation of enslavement, right? What they used religion in the Bible to be. Right. So it was a mechanism for us to behave ourselves, to not disobey. So it was a form of discipline that was put in front of us to say, if you do what the book says, if you listen to how things are, you won't end up in these predicaments. We won't have to do this for you. So we're looking at how things are built nowadays, how society is built, these things are still being put in place. If you follow the rules, this won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
If you listen to what we're saying, you won't end up like this. So it's a mechanism that continues to say, hey, if I stay on this straight and path, I won't end up in this lifestyle, or I
But
won't.
then
Well,
what it really did. Hold on. What it really did is the role of religion. It just mimics their system in itself already, because their system thrives off of excessive disciplinary patterns. So what they did was create religions that did the same. Correct?
Well,
Absolutely.
that's definitely what the word. We know the history of this, Molly.
Mhm.
The word religion, regulare, is to hold
Yeah.
back. This was
Yeah, that's why
created.
we just want to do that.
This was created by men, right?
Yeah.
For like what you said, for purposes of power. But when we're
Well,
talking about
that's why it's parallel. That's why it actually is
exactly,
equal.
but I think that's where men took it for a purpose of creating a power, for a sense of power to control people. But when you're talking about what's right before God, then there is a right and wrong. We all have this innate knowledge of what is right or wrong. It's
That's
just the
really what it's all
people
about.
that are in charge, or the person interpreting what the person in charge is saying religion is about. And
Right.
if we're talking about religion, you have to go into the history of where it all started from. But every religion has a different historical origin. So let's talk about what is right and what is wrong, because this is what
because that
from.
the origin of right and wrong has no
It has no religion,
it has no timetable.
and
That's
there's
exactly
no
correct.
religion with that, because
There's
that's
a que-
religion is a system of beliefs that's perpetrated on a people for the purpose of controlling them.
we know that.
So,
There's a question.
well, from what y'all are saying, it seems like that goes into the power of law, then the power of rules, things that are being enforced. So it's not the religion, it's the law. And each law stems from a form of religion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it depends on which religion you're talking about and which laws, because the laws of this country don't stem from like the 10 Commandments. All of them are not upheld. You know what I'm saying? And the laws in this country are created by the rulers that so are in power.
Let's bring it back, because somebody had a question. It said young men getting beat up in the name of religion or culture, and you think that those young men don't go home and transfer that energy to their families. And from personal experience, of course we do. Of course we do. We definitely transfer that energy home, and I know that personally, that it happened. You know what I mean? It's just there for whatever reason. The question I have for you guys as we close out, because we did it again. The funny part is, it happens. We sit there and we talk about the topics, and the tangent, I'm not worried about it. We always going to go on a tangent. That last little tangent was well needed. We spoke on a few things, got a few things off our chest. I'm good. Domestic violence. We spoke to it. You know what I mean? We spoke to the negative toll that is taken on our community, the abusive behaviors. We need to cut it out. But what we're going to do is, we're not going to just nutshell it, because that last question, again, like we did last week when we looked at the questions like domestic violence in the form of discipline, we're going to do it again, because I say, why is being toxic championed in our communities?
Huh.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So part 2 to it. So there we go again. We did it again. You know what I mean? Because that word kept coming up: toxic behavior. And but what happens now in our community is actually a champion thing: toxic. Chicks talk about it. Yep, culture
Like,
is
it's cool to be toxic.
Yeah, it's right there for us. You know what I mean? It plays out right for us for whatever reason. We're blessed, right? We spoke on so much about domestic violence and abusive behavior. We know there's a discipline that's needed, right? So we says, when does discipline become abuse? All right. That's when you're just going overboard, right? Discipline becomes abuse when it's excess, when it's, bruising and the hitting and all this other stuff, when you're trying to hurt people's morale, you're trying to hurt their very being, right? I want you guys to end me out with, how do we do this differently, guys?
You want to go ahead first, Joe?
Go ahead, Joe.
Sure, I'll go ahead first. there are different ways to express discipline, and we're not even talking about the physical discipline. One of the methods that I like to use is incentive. We know that there's something that's liked. We know that there's something that we favor. If that's being taken away or any time away from that favor, we'll get people to straighten up, because if you take away something that's liked or something that's favored, people are going to miss it and find a way to do what it is that we're asking them to do, or behave, if you will, or act right, if you will. And I think when it comes to domestic violence, we don't need to see violence. Our problems can be solved verbally. Our problems can be solved by sitting down and talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we're getting away from it. It's easy to be violent because that's the quickest form to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
But if you work in a sense, we understand that something's going to get better. You look for other ways to make us do better. So just give it time. Give it talk. Exactly. We got to talk about it. Don't be so quick to use it.
And don't turn it off, because I think what people do is that people have their limits. People have a limitation to how much talking is done before they're manic, or they're stressed out about the situation, or they're over the situation, or what have you. And I believe that that's what you disallow that person. You just shut someone else off. So how else they're going to communicate now? How else they're going to get across their point? Zach, yeah.
Okay, is talk the only alternative to abusive behavior? I mean, there are many actions that we can do to discipline our child, or to work out problems with a significant other, right? And some of those being like with your children, creating a system that causes them to earn the things that they want, and to lose the things that they want if they don't behave. And same thing with, talking with your significant other. Well, there's something called walk the walk, right? You talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. So if you want someone to understand you, then you have to listen with an understanding ear to show them you're willing to do the same. And I think within a relationship, any relationship, example goes a long way. You know what I mean? And if you, especially if you're the one talking to trying to show that we need to work this out, and you're trying to correct someone, but then you show otherwise, you kind of defeat the purpose of what you're saying. So this understanding has to come along with the love, the wanting to work it out, the unity, and you can break the cycle of this generational influence of abusive behavior. I've seen people do it who were abusing the household. They saw their parents abusing each other, and they have never hit their wife a day in their life. I'm talking about the men I know, and they've never hit their kids, and they have a great relationship, and things that I'm watching and learning from and trying to apply to my household. So it can be done. We have to want it, and you have to be creative, and you also have to be willing to understand.
Right. And I mean, definitely talk some more, talk about it. Guess what? There is a solution. If you talk about it, I guarantee there's some type of solution. There's a solution before it becomes physical. Physicality is never the solution. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Not with an adult.
Nope.
You know what I mean? Not with an adult. Physicality is never the solution. That means you just flip. That means you something triggered. It is never to be done. You know what I mean? Now your children, as you're trying to teach them and disciplining, like, hey, you don't want them to learn the hard way, so you're going to teach them. But after a certain point in time, even it's time to stop hitting on them. You know what I mean?
The point is, we gotta learn to keep our cool. We got to learn to keep our cool. A wise man or woman keeps their cool. When you lose it, this is when the abusive behavior comes out. This is when you say or do the wrong thing.
And remember, even in talking, you could be abusive in talking. So watch how you're talking as well, ladies and gentlemen, man. Listen, we're going to bring this back because we're going to talk about toxic. What's the topic? The topic is culture of acceptable toxicity. Okay, culture of acceptable toxicity within the Black community. That is something that we accept because we're talking about pimps, we're talking about gangsters, we're talking about rappers, we're talking about R&B singers, we're talking about all kinds of people, and we accept it. So we sit here and talk a big talk about, oh, why we beating on each other, why we doing this, why we doing that, because we've been doing it to each other. Talking bad about our women in these rap songs back in the 90s. Remember that? Mention ain't shit but hoes and tricks. Huh? Mention ain't shit but hoes and tricks.
Yeah.
Peace.